In this video, I'm going to go over the most common, and yes, they are very common, mistakes that DIYers, homeowners, and yes, even some of your professionals make when it comes to stripping wires. So I'm going to go over those mistakes. I'm going to go over a lot of the different tools that homeowners and others use in order to strip these wires. And then I'm also going to go over how they should properly be done. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So here we have a wire that has the insulation removed from it. And pretty much any electrical project, you're going to need to know how to do this. Now on the surface, this seems like a very simple thing to do, but there's a difference between doing something and doing something properly, or doing something to where it's not going to cause any issues in the future. And one of the things that I see a lot of homeowners and DIYers make, and I really feel is a big mistake, is instead of getting a proper tool for the job, they will get out a pair of needle nose pliers like these. But what a lot of homeowners will do is they'll take their wire and they'll take their needle nose pliers. Now, of course, you've got this part here. That's more of like a gripping area of the needle nose pliers. But down here, you've got almost a blade. This is a cutting area where if I was to take this wire and just put it into those needle nose and chomp down on it, I can take that wire and I can cut it down. Well, what they'll do is they'll take that cutting section, they'll put it in the needle nose pliers like so, and then they'll just go around the wire like so, and they'll just try to strip that insulation. And then once they feel like they've gotten it cut all the way around, they'll take those needle nose pliers, they'll put it on the part they're trying to remove, and then they'll pull that insulation off of the top. And a lot of people will look at that and go, well, that seemed to work pretty well. What's wrong with that? Well, the problem with this is because you don't know how hard to crimp down on this wiring. You don't know how deep you're going into that wire. So if we take a closer look at the wire, do you see right here at the bottom where I'm pointing at with this other piece of wire? Do you see how that's all marred up right there? That's from the needle nose pliers digging into that copper too far, and it's nicked it up really badly to where if you were to put a hook on this, say it's going on a receptacle, so then maybe you take your needle nose pliers and you just do one of these numbers, and now you've got a shepherd's hook on here. Well, now you have put strain on this part of the wire where you've nicked it all up, and then you're going to put this on a receptacle, and then once it's on the receptacle and that screw's tightened down on that hook and you go to push it in the back of the box, well, this is going to have to endure quite a bit of stress when you're doing all of this. And the more that you nick up and you bend this copper, the more it gets hardened. And when it gets hardened, it starts to get weak, and the more it gets weak, the more likely it is to break off. You are just asking for trouble somewhere down the line. It may not have an issue, at least for as long as you're living in the house, or you might have an issue pretty soon after, or maybe it's just years after, and you're not gonna have a clue as to why either your circuit's not working or that part of your house started on fire. So it's really important to make sure that you're using the proper tools when it comes to doing this job. But even if you think you're using the proper tools, a lot of the times people aren't using quality tools. And they'll go out to, even their grocery store might carry something like these. These are actually called wire strippers. They're very cheap, they're very flimsy, but you can find them at some of your cheaper stores. You can find them even in your big box home improvement stores. And because you don't want to spend money on a good pair, you buy these. So I really advise against buying these cheap ones. Now, there are some better made ones that are like this style. I'm not saying that this style is necessarily bad, but just don't buy these cheap ones that are like this where I can literally bend the handles on them like so. There are some decent wire strippers that are out there. For instance, I've got this pair here. This pair works actually really, really well, but the difference is it will tell me I've got solid and stranded listed here, and then it'll tell me the number of what gauge each one of these holes is for, so that when I put that wire into one of those holes, and with this style, I have to clamp down on it like so, I'm gonna have to spin it around like this to cut the wire all the way around. And then once I've done that a few times, I just pull away from me, and it's gonna strip that insulation off of that wiring. So this method can work. It's just a little bit slower than some of your other wire strippers that are out there. When you're going around and you're spinning it around like this, there is a little bit of a risk of nicking these up, just depending on what angle you're holding the wire strippers at as you're spinning it around that wiring. So you want to be careful with that. Make sure you're just spinning it at a 90-degree angle all the way around. And then when you pull away from it, you just want to pull away from it at 90 degrees and not at an angle. Otherwise, you could do damage to the wiring. Now, one option that a lot of pros out there use is they'll use their lineman pliers. They'll put it down in the cutting section like so. They'll go clamp down on it. They'll spin it around that wire a few times. Once they've done it a few times, they just grab onto it and pull that insulation off, and they connect their wire. So a couple things about using these to do this. Number one, electricians are doing this every single day. They develop a feel, they develop a skill to where they know how much pressure for the most part to put down on these wires to strip them properly in using this particular tool. That being said, a lot of them are in a hurry. A lot of them are just trying to get that stripped off as fast as possible. And so they might not take the care that is needed to make sure that that wire is not getting nicked up, that they're not putting too much pressure on it as they're going around it and possibly nicking up the wire like I did here. But I'm telling you that even the pros will do this when they use this method. Lineman pliers are great for a lot of things, especially when it comes to if you pre-twist your wires. I love them for that, amongst so many other things. But I don't recommend them for this particular job, especially for a homeowner. So that brings us to this tool right here. This is the one that most of you probably see me use on this channel. This is a great tool for stripping wires, but again, this tool can be misused just like everything else. And the mistake that most people make, and I'm not gonna lie, I've caught myself doing it from time to time, especially when I've been doing my videos because I'm trying not to hit the camera. And the mistake that is made most commonly with this tool, as great as it is even though we know which one of these slots or these holes that this 14 gauge wire needs to go in, so we'll insert it in. I don't really need to do any twisting, that's unnecessary. All I really need to do is just pull away from the wire straight away, and I'm gonna get a nice clean cut. I'm not gonna get hardly any nicks on that wiring as long as I pull straight away and I don't do what I'm about to show you. So what a lot of people do, and what is just such an easy tendency for anybody to do, including professionals, is you're trying to get that wire stripped, you put that wire in that slot, clamp down on it. Maybe you've got some older wire strippers like these, because just like knives, the cutting edges where the wire gets inserted in, they can become dulled down. And when that happens, it can make the cutting in action and then just pulling at a 90 degree away a lot harder. So what do a lot of people do, whether their wire strippers have dulled down or they're just in a hurry and they're having trouble pulling on that insulation away from that wire? They'll start doing this. They'll start wiggling it back and forth, because that is really going to cut into that insulation, and it is going to make it easier to then just pull that part of that insulation off just like so. It slid right off. But the problem with wiggling it back and forth, you're going to mar up that copper just like you would with some of the other tools. You're going to nick it up, and in some cases it can be a lot worse than this. So a lot of people don't realize that when you're doing this, you do not want to be doing this. This is going to be a tendency. This is going to be a bad habit. This is going to be something that's going to actually feel natural to do because it makes it so much easier to remove that insulation. But if you want a surefire way, and what is by far the easiest tool in order to strip wire, and you will not have to worry about nicking up these wires, is you're going to want to get a pair of wire strippers like these. These are also made by Klein. There's a couple of settings that need to be set on this in order for it to cut the proper size of wire and to the proper length. That's what this is for. So if we turn this wheel here, we can adjust the length as to how much of the insulation that we want to be stripped off. And then once we have it where we want it, we'll just lock that wheel down. You've got this wheel here, which is to adjust how deep the strippers go. But I will say, from what I have found, it doesn't really make a huge difference as to the size of wire. These clamps that come down on it have a little bit of flexibility to them, as far as they don't just dig down into the wire. There's a little bit of give to them. That being said, you will want to use it to fine tune it to whatever size of wire that you're using. So once those are all set up, the way that this works, it's very, very easy. Just insert that wire, have the end of it go up against this adjustable piece over here. And then once that wire's in there, all I have to do is squeeze the handles together. And it's just that easy and quick. It strips that wire off nice and clean with having to use almost no force at all. As you can see up close, there's literally no nicks on that whatsoever. And we have a tool that not only is not going to put any nicks on the wiring at all because it's set to a specific depth, but at the same time, since we adjusted how much of the insulation we were going to remove from it, that much right there, with this piece over here, we're going to get repeated results there as well as far as the length. So we don't ever have to really just measure it out. Once we get that length figured out, as far as how much insulation we want removed, we can just go all day just inserting new wire, and there you go, just that quick. So these are a little bit more expensive, but you can see why. The only areas that I've found where this can be a little bit difficult to work with is if you're kind of crammed for space to get your wire strippers in an area. Sometimes space can be an issue, but for the most part, in most instances, it's not going to be an issue. These are just quite simply the easiest and safest wire strippers to use, especially for the homeowner. Now again, that doesn't mean that a good job can't be done using some of the other tools. These are fantastic wire strippers as well. We've gone over the pros and cons. You can kind of see how they all work and some of the things to look out for when working on your own projects. So I highly recommend having both of these along with having a good set of lineman pliers. They all do a fantastic job for the jobs that they're designed for. For me personally, they all have a spot in my electrical tool belt. So I'll have links for all of these down in the description down below where you can check them out for yourself. And if you don't know already, I also have an Amazon storefront where I list not only these tools, but all of my favorite electrical tools, from electrical testers to screwdrivers to bits. If you want to check out my Amazon storefront for all the tools that I use on this channel and tools that I recommend, you can check out that link down in the description down below as well. Now, if you found value in this video, then you're definitely going to find value in this video right over here, where I go over some issues that a lot of homeowners don't really know about and some things that they definitely need to know for any future electrical projects they might take on. So I hope that you found this video to be helpful and interesting, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.